Did you know that Noah's Ark represents a deeper spiritual reality? Remember, in Genesis chapter 3, humanity was removed from the tree of life. And by Genesis chapter 6, mankind has wandered away from the Garden of Eden completely, both physically and spiritually. And there's a connection between Noah's Ark and the Garden of Eden. But Noah's Ark also connects to the tabernacle or the temple of God. Let's jump into Genesis chapter 6, verse 12 through 16 to see what's really going on with Noah's Ark. We are here in Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 12. God saw the earth is filled with violence, it's corrupt, and behold, it was corrupt. This emphasis, this repeating idea of corruption. For all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. That's what it'll say. So corruption is a repeating idea and theme. And speaking of repeating ideas, when you read through Genesis 6, look for these key words: mankind or man, daughters, sons of God, earth, land, corruption, corrupt, or violence. Those are key words. Some key ideas to look for and to pay attention to is when God sees, God evaluates, creatures see, the contrast between flesh and spirit, the corrupt versus the righteous, God creating and God making, the concern for the land or the earth, God preserving life, and then God ending life in judgment. To summarize Genesis 6, mankind corrupts the earth with endless violence until God finally responds. And then God chooses Noah to preserve a remnant, and Noah obeys God by doing all that God says. If we were to take two words to sum up Genesis chapter 6, the two words I'd use personally are destruction and preservation. Destruction and preservation. So just looking at verse 12, if you haven't watched the previous studies, you can go watch those. You don't have to. They're linked in the playlist. But by verse 12, it's as if the ways of the serpent, which first found a way through Adam and Eve and their disobedience, and then Cain taking Abel's life, the ways of the serpent have now extended and expanded throughout the entire known occupied world. So the serpent has metaphorically, figuratively, produced seed or offspring, just like God said in Genesis chapter 3. And that those seed, those ways of death and destruction fill the earth with the image of the serpent, rather than God's original call on mankind was to fill the earth with God's image, to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and expand and cultivate to the glory of God. And so something you should notice is by now, if you've been walking with us, in verse 12, this is the third time third thing that we've seen God see and evaluate. There's a lot of that taking place in this chapter. God sees, number one, the wickedness of mankind in the previous verses. He sees the intentions and the hearts of the people. He sees Noah and extends favor towards him. And here, God sees the earth that is corrupt and full of evil. There's a lot of God taking notice and seeing and evaluating and then responding accordingly. Also, God allowed mankind to have such a level of impact on the earth that the land itself could be corrupt. The land has become corrupt because of mankind corrupting their way of life that now pervades the world. Image bearers of God have such a profound influence on the land because they were originally commissioned to rule, have dominion, and be fruitful and multiply in the land. And so now, instead of mankind filling the earth the way God designed them to, we actually see mankind filling the earth with the ways of the serpent and his wickedness, and sin plagued the earth through the corruption of man. Sin brings death and destruction through mankind, bringing violence, and that corruption pervades the known world. Also, when it says, for all flesh has corrupted their way on the earth, is that hyperbole? Is that just an exaggeration to get a point across? Or does all flesh actually refer to even the animal kingdom up to that point? Because God says, I'm going to destroy even the birds of the heavens and the land animals and the creatures. So is this why God makes an end of the land and the sky creatures and all the other creatures with mankind? And if so, in what way had even the animals corrupted their way in the world, if that's even what he might be referring to? Also, what does it mean for mankind to corrupt their way? Specifically, again, the emphasis being on the earth. At least we know it involves violence and evil, which was noted in the previous verse, but it assumes an ideal. It literally assumes a pure way humanity has turned from or wandered from. If your way has become corrupted, right, that means It has gone the opposite direction of the pure and ideal way that God commissioned humanity to actually engage in, the right way of living. The earth here and the land, actually could be translated, better translated land, could only be corrupted if mankind occupied that land to fill it with violence and evil. In other words, the corruption in the earth is only happening, and it's possible because of mankind corrupting their way. In other words, unoccupied land could not be tainted and corrupted with human violence and bloodshed if human beings didn't live there to corrupt it. Therefore, God's issue must be with the occupied land in the earth, not just the general planet at large, which is usually how the flood gets framed up, as a global, just absolute annihilation of the planet as a whole, whereas so far, just the land occupied by mankind up to this point, which could be a limited region, seems to be what's in mind most, is occupied, corrupted land. Verse 13, and God said to Noah, I've determined to make an end of all flesh. So we see once again this statement about all flesh. For the earth, and I'm just going to highlight in famine, the earth is filled with their violence, corruption, whatever it ends up being. And once again, it's through mankind, okay? And through them could be referring to all flesh. So when we say all flesh, it's just all people. But violence and corruption have filled the earth, and God has determined to make an end. This is actually the first time in the narrative of Scripture that we see God, actually, he's going to involve Noah. He's telling Noah, behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So the earth is also in mind. Again, this usually gets framed up as like God sees sin, whack, and that's a part of it. But the earth and the corruption and all of that is also a large part of what God is doing. But this is the first time that we see God involve mankind in his plans by letting them know what he's doing. It's almost like God gives Noah secret knowledge that is only told to Noah. And that is juxtaposed with what we see the serpent do in Genesis 3, where he gives secret knowledge to Eve that brings death and sin and destruction. So while the serpent's secret knowledge brought death, God's secret knowledge to Noah about what's coming is to preserve life and give life. So this is the first time we see God actually involve mankind in preserving life through actually the destruction of life. This is also the first time we see God intend to make an end of something on the land. Up to this point, we've seen God create life and give life and sustain life, but now he's making an end of life because all life has corrupted itself to the point of no return. God seems to be rather than letting humanity drag this violence and wickedness out to its inevitable end, which would be a horrible tragedy, God just cuts it short. Violence here comes through people. And there's only violence on the earth or in the land because there are people that do the violence and commit these atrocities in imitation of the serpent. Also, it seems part of mankind's sin consequence, not just that their lives are taken, but in the process, the land has to be cleansed. The land has to be destroyed with them. And the word destroy, usually we think annihilation, absolute, complete annihilation with nothing left over, when actually God destroying the earth here is to actually just cleanse and bring about a new earth through him, with my dog barking for some reason, through him, destroying the old. So this is not to absolutely annihilate the old and leave nothing left over. This is just to make new and to bring about something new with what is left over from the old. And so the land here being cleansed of its defilement and corruption, that's what's in mind too. Also, creation is inextricably linked to the actions and the decisions of mankind. There's no way to get around that. Romans 8, creation's groaning, for the children of God to be revealed in Christ. And we see God make statements later in the Old Testament about people corrupting the land and the land needing to be cleansed of its impurity and pollution and innocent bloodshed. So this right here is not the only time this will happen. The land needs to be washed and sort of reset, but that requires the people to be removed entirely because they don't seem to have the ability to be cleansed or reset with the land. There's just a remnant who is righteous, or at least one righteous man who represents his family whom God will work with. And this is what God tells Noah, okay? Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is honestly where things can get pretty cool. Noah's Ark. No one really ever talks about these different descriptions of Noah's Ark. Now, I want you, just giving you a little heads up, think Garden of Eden. Think the language used about the garden. Think the tabernacle and the temple and the language used about the tabernacle and temple as I read the description of the ark. This is God commissioning a chosen righteous man in his sight, standing apart from his generation to bring about life through what this man chooses to build in obedience to God. Who does that sound like? You should be thinking Yeshua, Messiah, Jesus. Okay, so what you're going to see now, as described in the ark, is going to be similar to what we see in the garden or tabernacle. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Okay. Make rooms inside the ark. Cover it inside and out. This is how you're to make it. Now, I don't know about the dimensions and the numerical value and the spiritual significance of each of these numbers. Like, I know numerology to a degree, but how far this goes, I couldn't tell you. Make a roof for the ark. Finish it to a cubit above. Set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. Okay, this is what I really want to focus on. This is the fun for me. Okay. Question: did Noah know what an ark even was? Before we even get to the correlations between certain things throughout Scripture, did Noah even know what an ark was? How did he have a concept for that, if indeed he did not know what an ark was? How was he supposed to get this done? And where would he get the supplies? Questions that I ask practically about the story. Also, before God gives dimensions, right here in verse 15, God's going to say, this is how you are to make it, right? Here's the dimensions. The length, 300. The breadth, 50. The height, 30. Before he gives the dimensions and the specifications, God gives general key details about the ark that seem more important. Okay, the fact that it needs to be made of gopher wood, the fact that there are going to be rooms in the ark, and the fact that it needs to be covered inside and out with pitch. So I'm just trying to give you some breadcrumbs and lead you to the water. We got wood, we got rooms, and we got inside and out, it's covered. Now you might be thinking, Jesus, preparing a place. In my Father's house, there's many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you to go in so you could come with me, but I had to come out to you to bring you in with me through my blood, and I had to be hung on a cross. Absolutely. There's all that, okay? We take refuge in Jesus, who is the greater ark, and he's the greater Noah, and he's the one that brings us safely through any destruction that comes upon the earth and wrath and judgment, for sure. But, question, why gopher wood? Why does there need to be rooms? What are the rooms for specifically? Now, you and I practically think, well, animals need to be separated and there needs to be that separate. God doesn't say what the rooms are for. He just says there needs to be rooms. So the question is, what do they likely to be used for? Why is the ark to be covered inside and out with pitch? As we know that's, so water doesn't get in. It's to prevent leaks. It's to prevent people from dying. Inside too? And why is it both inside and outside, and specifically pitch? Oh, that's good sealant. Just some questions. What is this ark supposed to be a prophetic image of? And you go, why do you ask that question? Because I see too many correlations to other things throughout Scripture. For instance, Exodus chapter 25 tells us the Ark of the Covenant was to be made, the ark that sits in the Holy of Holies, right, where the high priest would go in on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. He'd go in there to atone for the ritual impurity of the nation. He'd go in representing them. He'd get out. There'd be incense so he doesn't look upon the glory. And he gets out, right, and he has bells attached in case something happens. That ark in the Holy of Holies in Exodus chapter 25 was made with specific wood, not gopher wood, but acacia wood. And that ark also was to be overlaid inside and out, not with pitch, but with gold. And that ark was to be carried by 4 poles, which only select few could access to transport it. And it remained in one specific holy place, where only one person could go in once a year to atone for the ritual impurity of the people. And you go, why are you making that correlation? because I see the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, that sacred territory of God being set apart uniquely unto God as his domain, as his throne room, you might say, as the place where God and man can actually encounter one another, and man can bring sacrifices and offerings and worship God by drawing near. I see this correlating to the Garden of Eden, but before I go there, look at the 3 decks, okay? This is how you're to make it. Lower, second, and third decks. Lower, middle, third being top, which you would assume, right? So the 3 decks, I'm just thinking, seem reminiscent of the tabernacle or the temple. There's similarities between the ark, between the tabernacle, between the temple, and also think about the tabernacle. You have the temple as well. You have the outer courtyard. You have the holy place. You have the most holy place. You essentially have 3 concentric circles. Now you could go beyond that and even dissect it a little more, but in a general sense, there is outside of the tabernacle where the people would come. There is the holy place where only the Levitical priest could go. And then there's the most holy place. 3 sections, 3 decks. Also, it being sacred territory set apart unto God, the tabernacle, seems just what the ark is. This ark is to be set apart unto God, to contain the remnant and the chosen. God seals it in, God protects it, God preserves it, God brings it through the floodwaters. It's a place where humanity is safe from the floodwaters of death and destruction that are coming upon the wicked around them. Real quick, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and I have some free gifts for you at abovereproachministry.com. Go to the website or click the links in the description below to check out all of our free Bible study resources. We have online Bible classes, devotional studies, Bible study workshops, all of my sermon notes, and more. You can even join our online church community on the Discord app. We also have discussion groups all around the world, and if you don't see one in your area, message me and we'll help you start a launch group. I personally lead a group in Spartanburg, South Carolina. If you live in the area, we'd love to have you join us on Fridays for Bible study. So contact me if you're interested, and if you or your church would like me to come preach or teach, just message me or shoot me an email and we'll see what we can do, because I love preaching in person. If you're a new follower of Jesus, click the New Believers section to access everything we recommend for new believers. And be sure to snag a copy of my book, Fruitful, to support this ministry. All right, that's all I got for you. Let's jump back into the video. So the ark, also, if we think about the 3-tiered Eden, in the Garden of Eden in Genesis 1 and 2, you have the tree of life. That seems to be at the center, which might be like the most holy place. And outside of that, you just have the general region of Eden, right? Which could be like the holy place. And then outside of that, you have the rest of the world, the Gentile nations, which is like the outer courts of the temple and tabernacle, which of course you had the courtyard for the Gentiles, so you dissect it even more. But the point is, the 3-tieredness to the deck, the fact there's 3 tiers is like the tabernacle or temple that has the 3 concentric circles, or the Garden of Eden, the tree of life. So it's like in the midst of chaos that swirls around it, this ark is like a mini Eden, which I took from Bible Project. I love that idea, that is floating, set apart unto God in the midst of chaos and destruction, and keeping people safe, just like Christ does for his people. We take refuge in Jesus. Also, the only other place so far that we see a reference to the side, okay, the door is specifically set in the side, and you go, well, that's just the most practical place to put a door. You don't put it on front or the back. Well, you could. You could think of practical scientific reasons why you shouldn't. Yeah, well, according to physics, you can think through that. But God does tell him, put the door in the ark in its side. Now, I'm just thinking, the only other reference to the side we've seen up to this point is in Genesis chapter 2. Adam's side is the place from which the woman is created. Adam's side is opened to bring life and then closed up with flesh by God himself. In other words, from the access point of man's side, life comes. And we think Jesus, from blood and water pours out of his side, and from his side, the bride of Christ, and the life of his bride comes forth through his sacrificial death and resurrection. And now the access point of the ark, the way into the ark, is going to be provided by God in the side of the ark. So you want in, and God is going to end up closing the door in and sealing Noah and his family in. We'll see that in chapter 7. Same way God closes up the side of Adam after bringing life for Eve. God preserves life in this ark, the access point being through the side, the way that we're brought into Christ through his life, death, and resurrection in our faith, which is what his side symbolically represents. Also, again, the ark has similarities to the Garden of Eden, the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, even the basket of Moses. Moses is floated down the river, preserved through the waters that killed the other firstborn children, or just male Israelites up to that point. He's preserved. Or think about the cleft of the rock Moses is tucked in to behold the glory of God on Mount Sinai in his backside. It's as if right here, when we see the ark floating on the floodwaters, it's an image of all these moments, all these places throughout history. It's a mini Eden. It's a mini temple. It's a mini sanctuary where man is safely tucked away in the hand of God. And ultimately, this is a symbol of Jesus himself, being the one we find refuge in from the storm and from death and from sin and from chaos. We find life in him. You know, why are there only 3 decks? Well, there's 3 sons of Noah. Maybe. Where else do we see the significance of the number 3 throughout the scriptures, but also throughout what leads up to this story? So to summarize, as we bring this to a close, verse 14 through 16, God could have built the ark himself. God could have just delivered it to Noah. But God specifically and intentionally involves Noah in the building process and gives Noah that responsibility, as if to say, hey, you're rather part of the way that Noah expresses faith in God is by doing what God says and by building what he's given him to build. And this gives us a glimpse into Jesus, who not only builds a greater temple as the greater Solomon, who not only builds a greater city and a greater kingdom as the master builder, and not only is Jesus preparing a place for us, like in John 14, the way that Noah prepares the ark for his family, but Jesus himself is the ark we take refuge in. His words, like in Matthew chapter 7, the words of Christ are what we build our lives on. And we are invited to build our own lives in response to what Christ has built for us. We're safe, we're secure, we're not adding to his work, but we respond to his work by building our own, lives on the words of Jesus through faith and trust, just as Noah was called to build. And through that, other people are invited to take refuge and are safe and are benefited from that. And I think our lives are to be built up in such a way where, in response to Christ's death and resurrection, in response to what he's built, which is a kingdom, an everlasting city, and a people, we are building what will benefit others and invite others into this kingdom as well. We're building our own lives alongside the rest of the church to build up the body in honor of the glory of God. In other words, just as Noah is invited in the building process of what God is doing in the world, we're invited to participate and build our own versions. Not to say our lives are Noah, we're the ark, but this image of God partnering with people. He wants to partner with us, and he's inviting us to build our lives on the rock of Jesus in his words. So that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts, your questions, your comments in the comments below. I would love to see what you guys are thinking and what you're meditating on, what you're seeing. And then we'll jump into the rest of Genesis 6 in the next video, and we'll bring this chapter to a close. So I'll see you guys in the next Bible study walkthrough. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to share your thoughts and your insights in the comments. If you want to share your thoughts and questions about these studies, join us every Thursday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live discussion together. And thank you for supporting this ministry. Your support helps us accomplish our mission, which is to teach people how to read the Bible so they can live and teach it for themselves. We're only able to make all of these free resources because of generous supporters like you. So thank you very much for all of your support. Make sure to visit AboveReproachMinistry.com to check out all of our free resources. And as always, keep moving towards Jesus.